phones while in detention. It follows a ban on mobile phones introduced by the Australian Border Force.
The case was brought on behalf of about 80 asylum seekers by George Newhouse, Principal Solicitor of the National Justice Project, and he joins us now in the studio. Thanks so much for coming in. Do you welcome this ruling from the Federal Court?
Yes, we do. I think that mobile phones are an essential link to the outside world for immigration detainees who've committed no crime.
So what was the problem? Obviously, Border Force bringing in this ruling that they couldn't have mobile phones. What effect did that have, and would it have had on asylum seekers?
Well, that's a good point. First of all, it was a nonsense proposition, leaving aside the law. The minister came out with a blanket policy to remove everyone's mobile phones on the basis that they might be used for an escape. Well, that's like saying there are drug dealers who use mobile phones to deal drugs in Sydney, therefore everyone in Sydney should have their mobile phones taken from them. The proposition doesn't make sense logically, but the minister decided that he was going to take people's mobile phones, and we brought a court case about a year and a half ago to stop that policy from being implemented, and we got an injunction in February 2017, but the case was only finally determined last Friday.
For those asylum seekers, what does having a mobile phone enable them to do? How significant is that?
Look, it's absolutely vital. Some people have been in there for up to 10 years waiting for a decision on whether they can be allowed into this country or returned home. And that's their lifeline to their loved ones, their advocates, their lawyers. It's absolutely vital. We've had calls in the middle of the night for people who were being taken to an airport to be deported, and without a mobile phone, people would have been unable to communicate. They've been, they talk to their loved ones daily. It's a really important lifeline.
George, in a separate development, I want to ask you about reports of the government signing a memorandum of understanding with Taiwan as far as sending refugees from Nauru to get medical treatment. Can you just explain what's happened there?
Well, look, the government has a position that no asylum seeker who comes by boat will ever be allowed into Australia. So they're doing everything possible in their power to avoid that. And one of the things they're doing is ensuring that people who do get sick on Nauru or Manus have a place to go for medical care. Now, it's not a very good solution, but what they've done is they've come up with a memorandum of understanding with Taiwan so that they can send sick asylum seekers on Nauru and Manus to Taiwan for medical care.
What's the threshold? How sick do you have to be? Clearly there are medical facilities on Nauru, but is there some sort of threshold which says, okay, that person is such, therefore they have to be sent?
Look, that's a good question, and I deal with these cases every day. You pretty much have to be dying or have cancer or have some kind of desperately urgent need for treatment for the government to even move you to Taiwan, let alone Australia for care. It's part of this cruel policy to deter asylum seekers from coming to Australia. It's really a shocking situation. You've got incredibly sick people on Manus and Nauru mentally and physically, and yet even the Taiwanese solution is not solving the problem. They need to be moved from that island.
The government would say that policy of deterrence is significant to deter people from getting on boats, from employing people smugglers and then potentially dying at sea. What would you say to that?
Yes, but they're not dying at sea, but they're dying on land, or they're destroying their lives for a political purpose. And I think it's extremely troubling to see people sick, not getting proper care. Some are dying. You're seeing deaths on Nauru and Manus from suicide and a lack of medical care. So I'm not sure how solving deaths at sea by putting people in harm's way on land is a solution. Frankly, they need to be moved. I'm not suggesting that they all come to Australia, not at all. But they need to be moved to New Zealand, to Canada, to America as quickly as possible.
We saw some comments from Peter Dutton in The Australian this morning, reiterating his stance, essentially saying he's not going to take his foot off the neck of asylum seeker smugglers. You could argue that the policy has certainly worked for them, but you're saying it has come at a significant cost.
Absolutely. He may well have his foot on the neck asylum seeker smugglers, people smugglers, but he's kicking innocent men, women and children in the guts, and that needs to stop. I understand the purpose of his political policies, but people's lives are being destroyed, and we really need to do something to stop that as quickly as possible.
Okay, George Newhouse, thanks so much for coming in.
Pleasure.